Air relief efforts continue in Ecuadorian coastal towns and cities after that deadly earthquake. Plus, the impeachment process continues in the Brazilian Senate against President Dilma Rousseff. Thanks so much for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Coddy Weddle, and this is From the South. Air workers and aid workers continue to help thousands of survivors of Ecuador's April 16th earthquake. More than 650 people, 650 have been confirmed dead so far. Palestine has sent in doctors on a solidarity mission to the coastal areas most affected by the earthquake. Thousands of survivors have queued around schools and police depots in search for water and food. Meanwhile, the government is setting up refuges in order to attend to the demands. And Colombia sent an airplane to the coast of Ecuador to transport Colombian citizens back to their country. Over 300 Colombian survivors who were living in Ecuador's coastal cities and towns were repatriated. The Colombian president, Juan Manuel Santos, has sent tons of aid and rescue workers to the neighboring country where some 400,000 Colombians live. And in Colombia, the government has admitted responsibility in the massacres of the city of Trujillo in the Cauca Valley after over 20 years of investigations. In the anniversary of the massacres, which began between 1989 and 1994, the Minister of Justice recognized the role played by the police and army in the killings. Investigations into the massacres show that paramilitary groups working for drug lords worked together with the army and police to disappear, torture, and subsequently expel the residents from the area. The impeachment process against President Dilma Rousseff of Brazil continues in the Senate there. Some hours ago, the Senate approved setting up a specialized commission to evaluate the impeachment process. The Speaker of the Senate, Rania, rejected an appeal to stop the impeachment on lack of legal grounds. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets of Brazil to resist the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff. Popular movements are organizing to occupy Sao Paulo, the financial capital of the country, in support of the government. The regional parliament of the Mercosur bloc of nations has also rejected the impeachment process. The president of the regional parliament, Jorge Tayana, said the process was a parliamentary coup and that Congress was bending the figure of impeachment to oust President Rousseff. Right-wing Brazilian lawmakers in the teleSur's complained about the remarks of Tayana and refused to attend the events of the 21st anniversary of the regional body. Bolivia is part of a group of developing nations which have no access to the sea. President Evo Morales announced that his country will be hosting an international summit on developing countries with no access to the sea. Now, the summit will seek to strengthen cooperation on common issues and to improve strategies to access development funds. The summit is organized by the United Nations and will include 30 countries as diverse as Paraguay, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Zambia. Haitians continue to protest over the second round of presidential elections, which have yet to be announced. Last January, polls were plagued by claims of fraud. The Electoral Council said it would complete a second evaluation of first-round results to test the claims of fraud and decide which candidate should take part in the runoff. However, the council has not yet set a date for the second round, and discontent there is growing. Thousands marched in Mexico City to demand an end to femicides. Protesters said they are trying to raise awareness on that issue, which has reached concerning levels in the past 5 years. As a report published by the National Citizens Observatory showed, impunity is one of the main issues. For the state of Mexico only, less than 5% of women's murders have resulted in prosecution. In the United States now, Donald Trump's two rivals for the Republican Party's presidential nomination announced on Sunday they will now join forces against him. Ted Cruz will forego campaigning in the Oregon and the New Mexico primaries to help John Kasich, while the latter will give Cruz a clear shot in Indiana. Now, both politicians believe that this strategy could limit Trump's ability to win the delegates needed. Cleveland. The city of Cleveland has agreed to pay $6 million to the family of Tamir Rice. Rice was the 12-year-old black child who was gunned down by a white police officer in November 2014 while he was playing in a park. The city will pay out $3 million this year and the remaining $3 million in 2017. Canadian hostage John Reedsell has been executed by Abu Sayyaf militants in the Philippines after a ransom payment was denied. Philippine military officials said a severed head was found on a remote island 5 hours after the ransom deadline expired. The Islamist militants threatened to execute one of 4 captives they have been holding since September 21st, 2015. Canada's Prime Minister has condemned the killing.
Condemns without reservation the brutality of the hostage takers and this unnecessary death. This was an act of cold-blooded murder, and responsibility rests squarely with the terrorist group who took him hostage. The Government of Canada is committed to working with the Government of Philippines and international partners to pursue those responsible for this heinous act and bring them to justice.
Queen Rania of Jordan met refugees at a camp on the Greek island of Lesbos earlier today. Her visit was aimed at highlighting the plight of people she said had experienced unthinkable tragedy. Refugees are kept in a disused military camp while they await the status of their asylum applications. Those who do not qualify will be sent to Egypt under the recent EU-Turkey deal.
Many of the humanitarian agencies that I have seen have expressed deep concern about the EU-Turkey deal. Many have questioned its morality, whether it's humane, whether it's ethical. And I think the deep concern here is that many of the refugees who will continue out of desperation to seek safety and security will now start to seek more dangerous routes.
The Brussels metro station has reopened under tight security after a bomb was detonated there, killing 16 people. Several armed soldiers and security personnel patrolled the station. Now, that incident took place on March 22nd and was detonated during rush hour at the station located near the European Commission headquarters. A car bomb exploded in a predominantly Shiite Muslim district of eastern Baghdad earlier today. At least 11 people were killed and 39 people were wounded. 39 others, according to security and medical sources there. It is the third such blast in 4 days in the capital. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the blast, but the Sunni Islamic State group often targets Shiite commercial and residential areas. Despite an official ban, around 50 anti-government demonstrators gathered in a square of Egypt's capital. Police used tear gas on the demonstrators after they stoned a police van. The protest coincides with the public holiday to mark the anniversary of the return of the Sinai Peninsula to Israel in 1982. Several people there were arrested. Libya's new government of national accord formally took control of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Tripoli. The GNA has secured 6 government ministries so far, while others remain under the control of various semi-official armed groups whose loyalty is often uncertain. The International War Crimes Court will investigate allegations of imprisonment and violence in Burundi that erupted in 2015. The UN Commission on Human Rights estimates that at least 430 people have been killed since April 2015, when President Pierre Nkurunziza launched a bid for a 3rd term in office. The ICC said they have reviewed reports that detail acts of the killing, imprisonment, torture, and sexual violence in their preliminary investigations. Kenyan police fired tear gas into a crowd of opposition leaders and their supporters as they marched on the office of the country's electoral commission. The protesters demanded that the commission be disbanded before next year's election. Several protesters were arrested and at least 2 policemen were injured by stones, according to police. Tens of thousands of protesters rallied outside the Turkish consulate in Los Angeles on Sunday to commemorate the 101st anniversary of the Armenian mass killings. The victims were killed by Ottoman Turks, and Armenia calls for the recognition that it was a genocide. Spanish cyclist Pello Bilbao has won the second stage of the Tour of Turkey. Bilbao finished ahead of his fellow teammate Jose Goncalves of Portugal. He finished the race in just under 4.5 hours. Bilbao is one of the hot favorites for this year's cycling competition. A rare carved stone unearthed by archaeologists near Florence is an exciting find in a quest to unveil the secrets of the Etruscans. They were an ancient civilization that flourished in central Italy 2,500 years ago, but their culture and language disappeared under the Roman Empire. And that's what we're covering on this Monday. Thanks so much for joining us. Plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Be sure as well to join us on social media. We'll see you back here tomorrow.